Hi everyone, this is Karen McClay, Director of Calmbirth, and this is the first of our conversation series talking to experts in the birthing world and parenting world about what sort of resources and options that you have to make decisions around your birth experience and parenting experience. So I'd like to welcome Janine O'Brien Jo Hunter, who are amazing independent midwives here in Sydney. Jo is Midwife Jo, so if you're looking for Jo, you can find her under a business name of Midwife Jo, and Janine is with iBirth, so if you look for her under iBirth. So welcome, ladies, and thank you for joining me this evening. Would you like to each introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself, and what was why have you become an independent midwife? What was your calling towards that?
You go first, Jo.
Okay. I came to midwifery really from being a birthing woman. So I had 4 children, 3 of which were born at home with the same midwife. Mm-hmm. And back then I was a doula. I'd been a doula for 10 years. And I decided that I wanted to do midwifery. And basically I never planned to really work in the hospital. I just wanted to work in home birth. And at the time we were able to do that. I didn't have to actually go and work in a hospital once I'd finished training. Yeah. So that's what I did, and 11 years later I'm still in private practice. Love it, love everything about it. I'm also co-creating a documentary called Birth Time, which we've been filming for 4 years, and it's just about, well, it is actually complete, it's ready to go, but you know, because of the whole coronavirus thing, we've had to put off the release of it. So that'll be, hopefully we'll be able to give some dates soonish when we know things are going back to normal. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. And Janine, tell us a bit about you as well.
I came into midwifery a little differently. I had my 2 children very early on in my life, and it was the pivotal moment of giving birth myself to my second baby, because my first baby was by Caesar, that I realised that I want to share this experience with the rest of the world. Like, every woman needs to know how incredible this feeling is. So I'd already wanted to be a midwife from when I was a really little girl. I had a vision board from a very young age. I think I was about 4 or 5. So it was something I always wanted to do, but giving birth was actually what made me want to be a midwife. So I started my career. I went through a different way. I went into nursing and then into midwifery, and went into the system first. So home birth wasn't really something that I had much experience from early on. I knew it was something I wanted to do by seeing lecturers at uni, but it was kind of like this, you know, pie in the sky kind of ideal. It was having 2 young children and being a single mum. It was quite hard back then to get set up, really. And then I worked my way through the system. So I went through a private hospital, then a public hospital midwifery group practice, then a public funded home birth program. And look, you know, there were so many amazing births and experiences from doing it that way. However, it wasn't true women-centered care, I found. And so it really led me out into private midwifery, where I could actually work for the women and provide true continuity of care that was completely women-centered and involved families as well. So, and that, yeah, that's where I am. And I just recently had my last baby, who was born at home with Jo, which was hands down best experience that I've ever done. So now I think Jo, after I gave birth to Frankie, she said, now you're walking the talk, which was, yeah, it was fantastic.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's excellent. And so tell me, Janine, what is an independent midwife, and how do you support women through pregnancy, labour and birth, and also in that postnatal period? Because that continuity of care continues over for quite some time in that postnatal period, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And look, I think that's the most important part of having a private midwife. We work independently. So Jo and I work with a collective of midwives. We don't work in a group practice setting. We work on our own, and then we collectively come together and support each other to support families. And basically we see women from the very, very early, some of us as early as most women will contact us before they even conceive. If not, we're the second or third person that the women are actually telling after they find out they're pregnant. And we provide care all the way through their pregnancy, their birth, and afterwards. We know it's that relationship that makes for good outcomes. Private midwife, we have a huge scope of practice. So, and we also have to do lots of education, double what a hospital midwife might have to do. Anything else you want to add in there, Jo?
We have to have done the pharmacology course as well, postgraduate studies, so that we can refer women for scans and write, referrals for pathology, and also certain things we can prescribe that's related to midwifery. So that's another part of what we do as well. What else? In terms of the collective that we work with, there's 11 midwives in that collective now, kind of ranging from working from sort of Port Macquarie right down to Wollongong and across to Dubbo and all areas in between. So, and we all support each other in our practice. So we all have our own clients, but then we come together to support each other as second midwives and education days and stuff like that. So it's really it's great. It's a really good little collective of midwives actually. It's proving to be very supportive, isn't it? It's great.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so how does the care of an independent midwife or private practicing midwife differ from the hospital setting apart from that continuity? So is there a difference in the timing of appointments, how long you look after them and carry on with them after they've had their babies? How does it work? What does it look like to be in the care of an independent midwife?
We normally start seeing women at about 12 weeks. And the schedule is probably see women a little bit more than the hospital setting does. But our appointments usually last approximately an hour. So most of that is really getting to know the woman and building a relationship and finding out what she wants from her birth experience and sharing information so she can make informed decisions about, whether she's going to do certain tests or not. Nothing's compulsory, it's up to her. It's really her choice what she wants to do, as long as she's making an informed decision. And we can help by sharing research and evidence-based information with her to make those decisions. And then I guess that once the woman's in labour, we go to her home and then we never leave. We don't leave until the baby's born. So we're not looking after people in different rooms or, we're kind of there for the long haul. Depending on whether she's having a first baby or not would depend on when we call a second midwife in. Because, the rules now are to have 2 midwives at every home birth.
Yeah.
So usually if it's a first baby, the primary midwife will go until she's in good cracking labour and we know the baby's on.
Yeah, you're just cutting out.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
We just lost you a bit.
Yeah, we just lost you a little bit.
What did you hear until?
What did we hear until? It was kind of like
until she's in good cracking labour.
Good cracking labour, yeah.
So if she's having her second, third, or fourth baby, usually we would go at around the same time because normally it's a lot quicker for those births.
Yeah.
And in terms of the actual birth, we go, we're there for the long haul. We're not looking after other people in other rooms. So we kind of, I guess that for me, that's where the safety lies in home birth, is one, the relationship with the woman and her family, and really building up trust so that, if I was to say, or if Janine or any midwife was to say, I think things are deviating from normal now and we need to transfer, that they would trust that is the truth and that they would be happy to transfer, and vice versa. If that woman's really feeling like she needs to go, even if there's not something clinically that's obvious, if her intuition or whatever it is telling her that she wants to go to hospital, then we would trust her and go with her. So that's probably the most important thing, along with being with her the whole time. So, when we're with a woman and she's having a normal physiological birth and there's no interventions, it's very, very obvious when something deviates from normal, because we can't blame it on anything else. We can't blame it on the Synto drip. We can't blame it on the morphine that she's just had. So it's, it's very safe and very safe care, I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And in that,
And just to add in with what Jo said, you know, we share not only evidence, we share the guidelines, and the guidelines come from Australian College of Midwives. And again, they're guidelines, they're not rules. So whilst we might advise, suggest, recommend, the women make the decisions that's right for them. Because not like when I worked in a hospital, there's a lot of policies and procedures that are great for hospitals because they're big institutions, but they don't fit every family and every woman. And they also often don't reflect the current evidence base. So, you know, it takes quite a bit of time for current evidence to actually make its way into hospitals and to make its way into practice, because a lot of practitioners have, you know, often ways of doing things that maybe they've done for a while. So often it's women who will come to me and say, Janine, I've found this, and they're the ones that often teach me, because the women who are choosing to birth at home are often very well researched as well.
And actually, to carry on from that, that's one of the beautiful things about being in private practice is that, you know, like Janine said, there's actually study that shows that it takes about 7 years for evidence-based practice to become into play. By the time that, you know, the research is done, you know, people have looked at it, the policies have changed in the hospital, and it actually filters down to, you know, practice. It's about 7 years. So for us, we can read a piece of research and change our practice right then and there. We don't have to wait for policy change and that sort of thing. So that's a big bonus for us. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in that postnatal period, do you carry on for, is it 6 weeks postnatal?
Yeah.
What does that look like? And after the women give birth, how often do you initially come to visit them, and how does it look over that 6-week period?
You go.
Yeah, so we all have a different kind of thing that works for us, but more often than not, we usually see them about 4 to 5 times in the first week, sometimes more, especially if it's their first baby, and then often, you know, sometimes weekly, or and then at 6 weeks. So they've got our phone number. They know that they can contact us. Excuse me, my talking of babies. If they need anything, they call us, and you know, we're usually over whenever they need, really. Obviously, there's a schedule of visits that works well for most women, but most of the time, sorry, someone needed to be fed. Most of the time, you know, I suppose the visits are very inclusive of information that is going to happen for the next little while. So often when birth goes well, women feel really confident in themselves and their bodies, and things go well after birth, usually when birth goes well. So feeding goes well. So when women are well educated with what's going to happen tomorrow, their fear is often not there. So they feel supported and educated.
And we are on the end of the phone 24/7, you know, so if there's any question whatsoever, you know, they'd be surprised at some of the photos we get.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. And so I guess then, what are the advantages for women for considering birthing at home? What's the research showing around birthing at home, and what sort of women would you suggest this would be right for them to consider?
I mean, the research shows that, I mean, particularly continuity of midwifery care in any setting, but certainly home, you know, in the home, that there's less intervention in home birth. There's better outcomes for both women and babies, and there's higher levels of satisfaction for the women and their partners and their families. You know, and that's looking at like versus like. I mean, often people will say, oh, of course the home birth's going to look better because we're just looking after low risk women, but there's plenty of studies out there that look at just low risk women birthing in a standard hospital model and low risk women birthing in a home birth model, and we know that the outcomes are better.
Yeah.
And that's got to be because of the continuity.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
And so is home birth really just for low risk women? Like, or what women would you take on to birth at home? Who chooses to birth at home?
Well, go on. Sorry, Janine.
No, you go.
There's definitely, you know, there's definitely different schools of thought. So you have women who are really highly researched that are having their first babies, and they see the benefits of it, and they come to us, and you know, those women usually go on and have fantastic experiences. And then there's another group of women who are very traumatised from their last experiences in the hospital setting, and they're not going back for seconds. And then they find us that way. That's kind of really the two main ones. Or women who have had really great, very easy experiences in the hospital and go, you know what, that was really easy. I just want to stay home next time. You know, so a big cohort of women, anything from, you know, corporate women right down to, you know, young 20-year-olds who, you know, are having their first baby. Like there's no sort of standard home birth woman really.
Yeah. And I think, you know, if women are making decisions, when you talk about who risks and things, I suppose there's risk in everything that we do, and it's relative. And as long as the woman often and her family are well, and it lands with the woman's the one that makes the final choices about herself and her body and her baby and her birth. But if she's well informed about like her own choices and what the options are or what could happen or, you know, what things we have in place, then, you know, of course we're going to work with her and what she decides. So, for example, I'd had a previous cesarean, and a lot of the time, you know, people say that's not, you know, safe to have a home birth after cesarean, when in fact the research actually says quite the opposite. Hazel Keatle has some great research around home birth after cesarean and VBAC. So I think, again, going back to the research and seeing what it says, but also at the end of the day, it's a woman's choice what she does with her body, and it's a human right, you know.
And it's also, I mean, what do you think safety is as well? I mean, you know, we've got emotional safety as well as physical safety, and that's a big factor, and that's a very big factor for lots of women. When we know 1 in 3 women are experiencing birth trauma in this country, they're coming out of their births feeling traumatised. So, you know, that's a big one in terms of even, you know, mothering their babies and, you know, postnatal depression and everything that comes from trauma. You know, emotional safety is just as important.
Absolutely. You're speaking to the converted on that one. With all of us here at Calmbirth, we're very, very big on that emotional safety around birth. So what then, I guess that leads us to that question, and that's always the question that I know that I get asked regularly as an educator, but also as a practicing midwife as well, is it safe? Is home birth safe? And what happens if things don't go to plan? How do you address those questions? How do you have those discussions with women and their families? Because often it's their families. Usually, as you said, the women are well researched, but it's the families that are getting into their ear a little bit, or partners that are not comfortable with birthing at home.
Do you want to go for it, Janine?
Yeah, so look, you know, it's part of the education process. You know, throughout the pregnancy, we talk about, you know, normal labour, normal physiology, what to expect, when to call the midwife, and also putting a plan in place. So all women have a local hospital, and we often, it's important that she books into her local hospital. Some of us have practicing rights at Westmead, so we're able to visit like a private obstetrician does, and continue to care for women who either have higher risk factors, who might not feel safe to birth at home, or if birth deviates from normal at home, or if their pregnancy deviates, so we can actually collaborate with an obstetrician. However, at home, you know, we have oxygen, we carry syntocinon and drugs, etc. We have IV equipment, cannulation. We have everything basically that you would have in a birth room at the hospital, but we also know that woman and that family really well. So it often is, like Jo was saying earlier, it becomes quite loud or quite, you're quite knowing when something's going off the normal garden pathway. And often the woman will actually be the one that will say, you know, not always, but sometimes she'll say something doesn't feel right, and it's actually quite an important thing for her to have her own realization that something's feeling different. And we have a very honest conversations about what's going on and how does she feel, you know, how does her partner feel, and what about if we make our way into hospital? And most of the time we have time, right, Jo? Like a true emergency is very rare, and the ones that do happen, true emergencies, we're actually often very well upskilled midwives. We have, like I said earlier, we have to do double the amount of professional education every year. And that's because we don't have those buttons on the wall to press if there is an emergency and lots of people run in. We have 2 of us there that know how to deal with obstetric emergencies while there's help on the way, which would often be an ambulance.
But saying that, Janine, it's so rare. It's so rare that happens,
because we're not doing things, to women.
What we do know is the cascade of intervention. Like we're not intervening unless we really have to. And whereas I don't want to bag the system out, but if particularly with women who have had trauma in the past, and we get their notes, and you can see exactly where it all started, whether it's that Synto drip that was put up or whether it was the epidural that she had, and then it goes on to the next thing and the next thing, and the trauma comes from there. So at home we're not doing any of that. We don't have access to any of it, which we call the deep water immersion in a birth pool the Homebirth is epidural. So it's normal physiological birth, and if it deviates out of that, then we go to hospital.
Absolutely. So so with that, so if a woman wants to have an independent midwife and the care of an independent midwife, but she's not comfortable birthing at home, Janine, you were saying that there are some midwives, independent midwives or private practicing midwives, that do have visiting rights to hospitals where they can actually take their women in and their women follow them into the hospital, and the women still birth in hospital, but under that care of that midwife. Is that right?
That's right. There is a couple of us in the collective, and then there's some other midwives in Sydney that actually provide that service as well. But it's only one hospital, so it's through Westmead, and they have to engage with a private obstetrician as well. It does come at an extra fee, so it ends up being quite expensive for those women who do choose that, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay. And is it do women get rebates? Any rebates coming with privately practicing midwives?
Yeah, so there's a Medicare rebate there's Medicare item numbers for antenatal and postnatal care. So some of that care is covered by Medicare. There's currently no Medicare item number for intrapartum care. So labour and birth care, there isn't a number, and we're really trying to lobby the government and push for that at the moment. To get more affordable for women, because obviously that part of the care is quite expensive because we're paying a second midwife out of that fee as well. And I think, hospital bed stay is the biggest, maternity is the biggest number of hospital bed stay, and if we look at how expensive that is, it would be in the government's best interest to actually start supporting women birthing in the community, and financially more than apart from everything else that we know is fantastic about it. From a financial perspective, it's actually a lot cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
beautiful. And Jo, your documentary Birth Time, that's about women birthing outside of the system, isn't it? Did you want to tell us?
It's actually not. It's actually about continuity of midwifery care.
Right.
So, and wherever the woman chooses to birth. So
right.
that could be in hospital, it could be at home, it could be in a birth centre. And it's about, the message really is one woman, one midwife, regardless of where she's birthing, what her risk factors are, what her socioeconomic status is. We know that outcomes are better in that model of care, and I'm a big believer that all women should have access to their own midwife.
Absolutely, and the research is incredibly strong with that. With that as well. So, and it's taking its time. We have moments in our system where it takes off and then it gets dampened down again, and so hopefully one day we will get there and see that. Okay, now finally, what would your advice be to expecting couples who are doing their research and are considering all their options for care around birth and that postnatal period? What would your advice be to them when they're considering all options? How would you talk to them about that?
I think it's about where their comfort level lies, really. I mean, home birth isn't for everybody, and that's okay. You know, if they're not feeling comfortable with that, then that's not a good idea for that particular woman. You know, definitely doing your research and talking to some midwives. You know, having a bit of a chat and getting your partner involved in that as well, because it's important to have your partner on board. Often the partners that are the most reluctant to start off with are the biggest supporters at the end. That tends to be the way it goes.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that, Janine?
Yeah, I think, you know, always listen to what you feel inside yourself is the right thing for you. And you know, I've birthed across all models of care now, and I know for me, birthing in an undisturbed environment with my physiology doing what it's supposed to do, for me was the safest thing this time round. But I remember Jo saying, there was a saying that a woman, I can't remember who the woman is, but first intervention in birth is when you walk out your front door. Who says that, Jo?
Oh, it was it Marston Wagner? I couldn't think it was Marston Wagner from...
I remember reading that too, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, when Dr. Sarah Buckley talks about undisturbed birth, and you know, it truly is one of the most, and can be one of the most amazing days in your life, and surrounding yourself with the right support and in the space that feels right for you is my biggest suggestion. Whether, you know, finding the midwifery group continuity of care model, or if there's not one available at your hospital, start getting one, lobbying one with your local government to start, you know, because we know the evidence is there that it truly is, you know, a gold standard of care for women, and all women around Australia should have access to it. And yet I think we're only at 12%.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's that high, actually.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It changes
yeah.
so much.
Yeah, so, you know, at least find yourself a care provider that you're going to know that you're going to have throughout your entire journey would be my suggestion.
And that aligns with your philosophy, you know. I mean, you need to find somebody, if you're really wanting to have a very normal natural birth and you're into natural therapies and you want to go with your physiology, then probably a private obstetrician is not really the right person for you, you know. And vice versa, you know, if you're wanting to have a lot of intervention, and if you want to have an epidural and you want to, you know, have all the things, which is absolutely your human right to do that, then a home birth midwife is probably not the right person for you. So.
Yeah, that's right. Look, it's all about choice, isn't it? And that's probably the most important thing, and something that I always tell women is that, you know, for women to have the best birth experience, they need to feel that safety, they need to feel calm, and they need to be well supported and private in that space. And that means birthing wherever their intuition is telling them is the right place at the right time. But it's also about getting educated. It's amazing the amount of women who still don't know that they have options in care, and that's the most important thing. Get educated, make informed decisions, and then whichever way you go will be the right way for you. Yeah.
It's one of the things I find quite just very surprising every time after I facilitate a Calmbirth course. It's the couples that will say, well, you know, what's the biggest thing you've learned out of doing this course? And they'll say, I didn't know I could say no, or I didn't know I had a choice. And that's huge for a woman, you know, who's often, you know, maybe got 1 or 2 degrees, but she still doesn't know that she has a choice over her own bodily autonomy to say no. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's very much about how we share information with women as well. You know, I mean, I could say to a woman, you've got, you know, I don't know, let me try and think of an example. You've got a, you know, 10% more chance of something happening to you. But when you actually look at the numbers of that, it's very small in terms of the numbers, the statistically how you look at it. So it's really about how, you know, we have a lot of power as practitioners, whoever we are, whether we're obstetricians or midwives, to sway women into the way that we want them to go in the way that we share information with them.
Yeah.
I think it's a big responsibility for us to do that really honestly and with integrity, and you know that doesn't always happen. So.
No, that's right. Language is really powerful. You can say the same thing in different ways and have completely different meanings
Yeah.
to women. And I agree with you. It needs to be given in a very neutral way, so as the woman really feels that she, you know, this is, you know, the pros and the cons to it. How do you feel about that? What questions have you got? I love Millie Hill talks about, you know, your body, your birth, your baby, and I think that's exactly what it is. It's about realizing that women are in charge of their journey, and the caregivers are there to support them, not manage them.
Yeah, and also the lovely thing about actually birthing at home is that we're invited into women's homes. It's not our domain, which is very different to a hospital setting. You know, when a woman goes in and her partner, particularly the men, I think, or partners with female partners, when they go into a hospital setting, that it's kind of a very foreign space, and it's almost like it's not their space. You know, it's very hard to, particularly for partners, to feel comfortable in that setting. And with Homebirth, we're invited into their space, so it's their domain, and you know, they're in control of what's happening. And you know, like I said before, hopefully the relationship is such that, you know, we trust each other, and you know, if anything does deviate, then we go. But yeah, I feel like the venue is pretty important too, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's their genomes as well, their beautiful microbiome, which, you know, is incredibly important, we know, for babies, for the birthing experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for having a chat with me tonight. I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule. I know, Jo, you've been very busy today, and you know, keep doing your amazing work that you're doing. I think it's incredible that you're really working to empower women and bring back that power, give them back that power in that birth space, which I think is really, really important.
Thanks, Karen. It's great to talk.
Thanks, Karen.
No worries.